Good morning, students. Today in this video, we are going to see the structure of brain. The brain is the most complex organ in human body. It is responsible for every thought, action, memory, feeling and experience of the world. The jelly-like mass of tissue contains 100 billion nerve cells, that's neuron. And we know that the brain acts as command and control system. It is a site for information processing. And where this brain is located? Yes, it is located in the cranial cavity. Now coming to the structure of brain. Brain, it is divided into three main parts. They are forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. This forebrain, it is formed of cerebrum and diencephalon. Forebrain, it is formed of cerebrum and diencephalon. This diencephalon, it is formed of thalamus and hypothalamus. And midbrain, there is corpora quadrigemina. So in midbrain, corpora quadrigemina. And hindbrain, it is formed of cerebellum, pons and medulla oblongata. So hindbrain, it's formed of cerebellum, pons and medulla oblongata. So first coming to forebrain. This forebrain, it is formed of cerebrum and diencephalon, isn't it? So see this cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. So this is the cerebrum and it is the largest part of the brain and it occupies 2/3 portion of the brain. It is longitudinally divided into two cerebral hemispheres by a deep cleft called median cleft. See, this is the model for brain. And this brain, this is the cerebrum. So the cerebrum is the largest part of the brain, that is it occupies about 2/3 portion of the brain. It is divided longitudinally into two cerebral lobes. See, this is right lobe and this is left lobe by a deep cleft. This is the cleft, deep cleft called median cleft. And these two cerebral hemispheres, they are connected by a band of nerve tissue that is called as corpus callosum. The two cerebral hemispheres are interconnected by a band of nerve tissue called as corpus callosum. And the outer portion of the brain, that is formed of grey matter. So see, the outer portion of the brain, that is formed of grey matter and is said to be cortex. So the outer side, it is said to be cortex and is formed of grey matter. Do you remember this grey matter? What do you mean by grey matter? The neurons are not covered with myelin sheath. They are said to be grey matter. Now, inner to the brain, there it is formed of white matter. White matter, and that is said to be medulla. It is said to be medulla. We can say it as cerebral medulla. Here the outer surface, that is cerebral cortex. So white matter, what do you mean by white matter? If the neurons are covered with myelin sheath, that is said to be white matter. So the outer surface of the brain. So see, this is the outer surface, isn't it? The outer surface of the brain, it is formed of grey matter and is said to be cortex. The outer side is said to be cortex. And this inner side, this is the inner side. Inner side is formed of white matter and is said to be cerebral medulla. Now you see in the cortex, see there are many ridges and furrows, or we can say there are elevations and depressions. So elevations, there are elevations, and these elevations, they are said to be gyri, and depressions, they are said to be sulci. So in the cortex, there are elevations and depressions. The elevations, they are nothing but the ridges, they are said to be gyri, and the depressions, they are said to be sulci. And these elevations and depressions, they increase the surface area of the cerebral cortex. Look at this diagram. This is the cerebrum. So it is occupying the largest portion of the brain, that is about 2/3 portion is occupied by cerebrum. Each cerebral hemisphere is formed of 4 lobes. They are frontal lobes, parietal lobes, temporal lobes, and occipital lobes. So when you are taking the cerebral hemispheres, there are 4 lobes. They are frontal lobes, parietal lobes, temporal lobes, and occipital lobes. And these lobes, they are said to be cerebral lobes, and they are performing specific function. Damage in the specific lobe in turn affects its function. And cerebrum is the seat of intelligence, thinking, consciousness, memory, reasoning, intelligence, imagination, and willpower. So cerebrum is the seat of intelligence, thinking, consciousness, memory, imagination, reasoning, and willpower. Next one is diencephalon. So this diencephalon is formed of thalamus and hypothalamus. This thalamus, it is present in the cerebral medulla. So here the thalamus, it is present in the cerebral medulla, and it's a major conducting center for motor and sensory signaling. So conducting center, what do you mean by conducting center? It is taking the impulse from sensory organ to the brain, and the brain, it is giving the commands to the effector organs. So this thalamus, it is a conducting center for sensory and motor signaling. It acts as a relay center. The next one, hypothalamus. So hypo means low or below. So this hypothalamus, it is seen below the thalamus. Here this is thalamus, and here this is hypothalamus. So hypothalamus, it is seen below the thalamus. It controls the involuntary functions like hunger, thirst, sleep, sweating, fear, etc. And also it controls the body temperature, that is, it acts as thermoregulator. Again, this hypothalamus, it forms a link between nervous system and endocrine system. So when you are taking this hypothalamus, it is seen just below the thalamus, and it is controlling the involuntary functions like hunger, thirst, sleep, sweat, etc. It controls the body temperature, and also it is forming a link between nervous system and endocrine system. The next one is midbrain. So midbrain, it is located in between thalamus and hindbrain. So see, this is thalamus. So this midbrain is seen in this area. So thalamus, it is midbrain, it is seen between thalamus and hindbrain. On the dorsal portion of the midbrain, there are 4 swellings called as corpora quadrigemina. So on the dorsal portion of the midbrain, there are 4 swellings called as corpora quadrigemina. And this midbrain, it is responsible for controlling the visual and auditory reflexes. So visual, it is responsible for sight, and auditory reflex, it is responsible for hearing. So midbrain, it controls the visual and auditory reflexes. The next one is hindbrain. The hindbrain, it is formed of cerebellum, pons and medulla oblongata. So see, first one is cerebellum. Cerebellum is the second largest part of the brain. So see here, this is cerebellum. So cerebellum is the second largest part of the brain and is divided into 2 lobes. It coordinates the voluntary movements and maintains body balance. So see here, this is cerebellum. So this cerebellum, it coordinates the voluntary movements and maintains body balance. The next one is pons. So pons, it's a Latin word which means bridge. Pons, it's a Latin word which means bridge. So bridge, it will connect 2 things, or it will connect 2 parts. So this pons, it is forming a bridge between cerebrum, cerebellum, then medulla oblongata. Pons, which connects the lobes of cerebellum. It relays signals between cerebellum, then to cerebrum, medulla oblongata, signals between cerebellum, cerebrum, midbrain and medulla oblongata. It controls the respiratory and sleep cycle. So pons, it controls the respiratory and sleep cycle. The last one is medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata. So this medulla oblongata, it's the posterior part of the brain and is continuing a spinal cord. It has 3 centers. Cardiac center, respiratory center, vasomotor center. So this medulla oblongata, it is having 3 centers like cardiac center, respiratory center and vasomotor center to control heartbeat, respiration and contraction of blood vessels. And also it regulates vomiting and salivation. So when you are taking this hindbrain, it is formed of cerebellum, pons and medulla oblongata. I hope you all might have understood. And you study this cerebrum as homework.